All right, so I made this movie about somewhat of an introduction to human adulthood, looking at how does one reach human adulthood, and I was thinking a bit about what would be a good subject to look at first, and I think one of the main points of this whole thing is that it's a personal journey, meaning it is something that you have to do for yourself, by yourself, and that, you can look at other people, but only as inspiration or as examples what you would or would not want in your own life, right? You can't outsource growing up. I know the way society works makes you think that it does, and that's why I want to address it specifically. And more specific, I want to look at education because I feel that it is one of the structures and one of the things that we have in place in a society that really confuses us about how we work. All right, now I talk a lot about education. I might have said this before in a different movie. If so, I apologize, but it is just one of the main points that I see is going on. And I have to admit that I haven't been in school myself for at least 15 years, but when I talk to people about it that are in school or that have kids that are in school, I get the sense that we're still doing the same thing as we have been doing for a long time. Now, what is my main issue with education? I would say the most important issue I have with education is not so much the content of the education, right? I think I could talk a lot about what's wrong with the content or why we should be having different subjects or the way we treat subjects. But what I find even more worrisome in the whole setup of education is the way that it deals with authority and the way it deals with knowledge. Meaning, there is this idea, I think, that in order for us to be able to educate our children well, we have to kind of give them the feeling that we know what's going on, right? Like we need to have some sort of credibility before they will listen to us, which I think is a very messed up way to look at things. I think it says something about your own insecurity as an institution or as an educational system that you feel that that is necessary, because if I look at kids, I see open beings that will listen to anyone pretty much, as long as it's somewhat interesting. But I feel that the way we look at authority, the way we deal with authority, the way we think there are systems and structures and like companies or institutions that have authority and we don't, is completely messed up. And I think it's part of what they teach us when they put us through school. And it's not something that's spoken out loud, saying you have no authority, I have all authority, even though it might be done. I don't know, I haven't been to all schools. But I would say that most schools have like the best intention to help you. But the way it's set up, the way that there's this structure with professors or educators that really know a lot about a subject, and they will tell you the way the thing works. They will tell you about the world. They will tell you facts. These are not ideas. These are not things that haven't been falsified. No, there are facts. And the professor knows because he's studied this for 20 years. And so he has the authority and you need to be quiet and listen, right? That is maybe not the way education works in all schools nowadays, but it's still like the unspoken idea behind it is that you are here as a student to receive the education that you need. And we decide what is the proper thing that you need. And we decide how deep we will go into certain subjects and what subjects we will deal with, right? And if you have questions, then you may ask them. And if they are critical questions, then we might answer them, we might not. What we certainly won't do is rewrite the content of the subject based on your feedback, right? If we are looking at history, you will be told what history was like. And you will be told what was there to be studied, right? We don't teach you about being a human. We teach you the facts of humanhood or something. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it's like the idea that gets created is that you come into the world. The world is a set place that has rules and that has systems and it's been really thought out well and by people that really know what's going on. And, you need to take notice of how they've done that so you can respect that and function within the structure as it's been set up, right? That's pretty much what they do. And in the process, they kind of tell you that you don't know anything, that if you do have an idea, it's probably been thought of before by smarter people than you, and unless you get really, really good grades and high IQ scores, then you're probably not that smart, and you're, you best just follow others and respect their authority. And experts will always know more than you do, right? Well, I can tell you that's totally false. I mean, I made the video, We Know Nothing or something, which was the chaotic openness video, which, if I look at it now, it's just a rambling, which wasn't making that much of a point, but I do feel like I've touched upon the points and the truths in that video a couple of times, right? There is no such a thing as an expert necessarily, right? Somebody might be an expert in something, but you cannot put him down as an expert and always let him be an expert. If the expert doesn't keep up with his field of interest for a while, he is no longer the expert, right? He might have wrong ideas about things. He might not know everything anymore. It's impossible to know everything about anything these days anyway, because we are standing on the shoulders of giants, right? That's the line, and it's an awesome line. It's a true line, right? I think someone told me that there isn't one person in the world anymore who can build a phone, or who can build a camera, or can build a TV, right? It's so complex. There's so much technology in these little devices that it takes at least a team of 20 experts to have all the technology available to build it. So we've become so specialized that, the expert lacks a certain overview, lacks a certain idea about the general thing. He knows a lot about the specific thing. And the same goes for the teacher, right? He might know a lot about history, but he might not know a lot about biology. But they might be very much intertwined. And I think history is a great example when it comes to education, because I think they're teaching it all wrong. I think history should be the main course in any curriculum. Is that how you say it? And history should be part of every subject that you take. You see, the way I like history is the way that someone who knows a lot about it and is good at telling stories tells you something that went on, and not so that you can have grave thoughts or serious thoughts about it, but as an example of what happened. He can stop during one of his stories and ask you what you would do. He could give you 2 or 3 lines of story and ask you which one do you think is true, right? I mean, history gives us so much of human actions and human examples, both as individuals and as a larger social thing, right? It's worthy of studying. It's worthy of realizing that history in itself is a crazy subject, and that it's, half of the stories that you're being told are made up anyway. We don't know a lot about a lot. And when you read a history book, most of the time you think we've got it all figured out, when we don't. So history is very interesting. Also, the history of a specific subject is very interesting, because if you were to study biology, and not just what we know now, but also the history of how biology as a subject developed, what we knew or thought we knew 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years. If you were taught these things and were able to look at them with someone who is interested in looking at them with the big background, right? With the experience, the teacher. If you were to engage into that subject, that would be so interesting. You would find out that knowledge is constantly in flux, and that what you're being taught now will probably not be completely right or completely falsified within a couple of years. Who knows, right? Because that's what we need to teach, not just kids. We need to teach everyone. That all these structures, all these ideas, they're just temporal things that we infuse with all these concepts and ideas that perhaps are not correct. And I think we come from a society, we live in a society where it's still a lot about things that direct the masses and the masses that follow that direction. And I would say that a lot of institutions, without explicitly saying so, still have this idea that humans can't handle themselves, right? Left to our own devices, who knows what we will do? And in a way, they are right, because we haven't become adults, most of us. There's no focus on being an adult. There's a focus on getting a job and making money. There's a focus on having a relationship and drama. There's a focus on growing up and reaching a certain age, and then you're an adult, right? Then you can drink or whatever. But that's misguided. It's an old system. It's an infantile system that we're still clinging on to. But it tells, in that process of educating us, or whatever it's called, it tells us so many lies that, and the thing is, it tells us subconscious lies. So the whole system tells you you are not worthy, in a way. It tells you you have no authority, in a way, right? And then you get older, and then you realize, well, it's, I've learned a lot about this subject. I pretty much know a lot about it, right? But it's the way education is set up is giving us false ideas about structures, about institutions, about experts and people that are in the know versus those of us, that just live life and feel like we're never in the know because doubt is like always present. Things are very complex. There's different perspectives, right? It's so different than just reading a book and reading this is what the world is like. And then, in this whole thing, I haven't even talked about the fact that in school, they should address the fact that you're a conscious being and that brings with it many, many challenges of consciousness, of death, of being alone, all these things, solitude, right? So not only does education not give us what we need, it actually makes us think things that aren't helpful to us. And I think, if you think about becoming a human adult, the first thing you have to do is to cut yourself off from that system and realize that it's up to you. It's that you are on your own. The first thing you have to do is accept the fact that you're not an adult. Second thing you have to do is take full responsibility for becoming that adult. And knowing that it is the struggle to self-reliance that you're trying to get to, right? You're trying to get to a point where you're able to deal with yourself and help yourself and help yourself move into a certain direction. It's about dedicated and deliberate acting towards a certain growth, towards a certain development by changing your actions, changing your habits, changing your patterns of thinking. And these usually, I would say, get changed by looking at things and trying to realize what is really so instead of what you've been told. Because I would say that a big portion of what you think is true has been put there by other people. And you haven't ever verified whether or not they're true. You live in this fantasy world, really, where you think the moon is important and you think, 10,000 feet in the ocean, you know what creatures live. I don't know what people think about, right? But they don't think about the fact that they're a local being. They don't think about the fact that they got to deal with themselves their whole lives, that is the first thing you got to figure out. They don't realize that they are their own authority. And if they give away their authority, they're left with nothing. They know they should think about whether or not they should be consuming all the media that they're consuming, right? We're getting more and more aware on what we're putting in our mouths, but we're not that aware of what we're putting into our brain, right? We just switch on the news like it's nothing. And then they show you death and destruction, and you think that leaves you the same? I don't think so, right? So, I think authority is a big part of a concept you got to take a look at, something you got to deal with, because this society, in order to have it function the way it does, has been trying to take away your idea of authority for a long time, right? And I think even with the social media, right? It's all about following. It's all about the same things that are going on with education, where we have the professor and he knows everything. Now we have the guru, or we have the actor or the singer, right? We all follow that person, and whatever that person does is fucking awesome. We halo a person. And by doing that, we not only make it an unrealistic thing where this person now has to live up to all these ideas that he or she might not live up to because it's just a regular person, on the one hand. And on the other hand, we're kind of pushing them away from us, saying, you're special, but you're so special, I don't have to feel the same responsibility to do the work, because probably that person put in a lot of work to get to the point where they are, and now we just want to look at it and enjoy it, but not feel the responsibility to do that as well. And I think it's all part of this education system we've got set up, and I think it's something that if you want to become a human adult, you gotta be aware of how that works and pretty much try to say goodbye to that thing, right? Personally, I can only say that I've never started learning really a lot of interesting things after I got out of university, right? After they told me what I needed to learn, and they told me what I needed to know, and I had the freedom to look around and just think about what I like to think about and read what I like to read, and that's what I really started developing into a conscious being, and really started to explore the world for what it was worth, and tying things together that weren't tied together in education, because they were telling me there was just singular subjects that had their own thing, and if you knew a lot about that, then you knew a lot about that. What they didn't teach me was that if I opened up my field of interest, and if I started becoming aware of fractality and the way things are intertwined into a one living system organism thing, that if I were to figure out one thing, that would make it so much easier to figure out a different thing, because I already understood a lot of the basic laws that were being applied in the way humans work, the way we work together, the way things work, right? It's all kind of the same if you start to really look at it. But if, we just had one course in school dealing with life, then what about all the biology professors? What about them? So, I don't know, man. I think it's teaching you the wrong things, both as a medium and as a message. And I think it's something you need to look at closely and decide for yourself how you want to deal with that. And just embrace the fact that you are an autodidact. And I will address that in a different movie as well, but it's something that I feel people just don't seem to get. There's no one who can teach you anything, lest you teach yourself. All right? So good luck with that. Thanks.